music on.
And
We're trying to find out right now.
I have ours turned down.
You do?
I think it's,
It's that loud out there? So those windows open? Or the window open?
it'll only be good if it's super good.
Yeah, I'll
Won't be
check.
a problem if
They're gonna turn it down or turn it off.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's the check to push it.
Thank you.
The other off.
This one's down low.
Well, good evening, everyone. I want to start off the evening talking briefly, not so much about this debate, but about some influences on at least that influenced me. We were originally supposed to be talking tonight about R.J. Rush, actually last week about R.J. Rushdoony. That name keeps coming up, at least in my own personal ministry and in my own personal thought. Now, why? Well, some of you know that there's a couple reasons for this. Well, the first reason is that R.J. Rushdoony did what came to be called, he pushed the antithesis. He would push it and push it and push, and by that we mean he was constantly asking, is this idea, is this thought, is this new thing, is it Word of God, is it Word of man? It's one or the other. It's Word of God, Word of man, everything. Word of God, Word of man. Another thing that he was able to do very effectively with me that no one else was able to do. Bible college graduate, been in church all my life, morning, evening, and Wednesday night. I pretty much was a three-time, and then anytime there was a local missionary conference, I was there as well. My father would take me. And no one ever brought up this idea of infallibility, an inescapable concept. This is a little $2 book that we have. There's just a couple of them left there. I hope someday that you get a chance to read this book and understand it. R.J. Rushdoony taught that infallibility is inescapable. Everybody has a point at which they believe something is unattackable. It's infallible. It can't be questioned. Now, of course, he got some of this idea from Cornelius Van Til, who argued that in every debate there's a given. You don't prove everything in every debate. Some things are just given. Some things you just believe and you don't have to prove. With that, let's talk about this particular debate. I hope you get a chance to read that. It's $2. If you can get that idea in your head that everybody believes in infallibility, everybody, even the most flaming atheist, has certain things that he says cannot be questioned. If you can get that idea through your head, you will understand an awful lot about what's happening out there. And also why this idea that Ken Ham didn't bring enough evidence to the table is ridiculous. Because if you've ever gotten into it with some of these people, and I have, I've argued with the socialists, I've argued with the communists, I've argued with the evolutionists, and you know what? It's not about evidence with those people. It's about their idea of what's infallible versus our idea of what's infallible. Well, yes, I saw a few hands, a few people didn't get to see this, what I would call epic debate. As soon as it was announced here, maybe, I don't know, maybe 4 months ago now, you knew that this thing was going to be pretty big. When's the last time we had something like this big? I think it'd be a really hard time to think back when we've had something like this. Two guys going head to head from completely different worldviews. Tonight, we have our statement here, debating the debate, maybe more like discussing the debate, but there's a lot of things about debates that we will discuss, and I hope when we're finished you'll have a few questions for me, because I'm going to make a few assertions that are not maybe a real mainstream tonight, and so I want to give you the chance to ask when you get that opportunity. Tonight's presentation is sponsored by the Mid-Atlantic Reformation Society, of course, and the Independence Reformed Bible Church. A few things, first of all, a few factors to consider at the very outset. Tonight we want to look at 6 items. We want to look at the debate itself. We want to look at the goals of the debaters. Not always an easy thing to figure out and to know. By the way, can everybody see? Can you guys see right here okay? All right, good. We want to talk about debates in general. We want to talk about this debate in particular, and see this debate in the context of debates in general. And then we want to talk about the scramble to gain a post-debate advantage, which happens with every time. That's why presidential debaters have spinmeisters that fly around afterwards and get to all the talking head shows. They're trying to gain a post-debate advantage. And then sixthly, we'll talk about the way in which a winner is determined. Now this I find particularly intriguing. There were winners declared on this one. Well, let me ask you this way. Did we have to wait until the debate was over in order for some people to declare a winner and a loser? The answer is no. In some cases it was like predetermined, almost like predestined. Like Calvinism coming to debate class or something like that. And then we saw some, and I read more than a few, declarations afterwards where some things were declared, and I was like, well, were they watching the same thing I was watching? But this idea of a winner is actually way overblown in a debate of this nature. We'll talk about why winning is overrated in this particular case. So those are six things we're going to talk about. Okay, first of all, the debate itself. Oh yeah, all these important things: physical appearance. Anybody read any post-debate information? Oh, so I read that there was Bill Nye had to show up in his classic trademark bow tie. Somebody said that Ken Ham looked like his suit was too big for him. This is real important stuff when it comes to debates now. You know that, right? Who's wearing a bow tie and whose suit is too big? Got to know these things. Confidence. Oh, let's see. Who looked like they were more confident? Who looked like they were more confident? Comfort. Who was more comfortable, in front of the TV lights and so forth? Now, remember how I said earlier that winning is overrated? Well, lots of times people that are all into the winners are into these types of things. Oh, here's one. Who's funny? Come on. We all know that the way to determine a winner in an argument is who gets to make the other guy look like an idiot. You're always trying to win the audience, right? How do you win the audience? Do you win the audience by saying, oh, okay, the audience all says, that's a great point. I think I really got to think about that. Is that how you win the audience? Not nowadays. The way you win the audience nowadays is you get the audience laughing at your opponent. And it doesn't matter who's got the facts and who's got the rhetoric and who's got the evidence. It doesn't matter. You just get your guy laughing at, or you get the audience laughing at the other guy, just laughing, and that's all you have to do to win the debate. And then who's got the best stories? I saw one evaluation that said, hey, that Bill Nye, he really had good stories. And I thought, I think that those whole evidence and facts thing is a little bit overrated again. Let me go back to the stories, and I thought, Bill Nye, he had a story about didn't he have something about his father going on there? Something about his father. What's that? Oh yeah, he had to lay in the bed to learn how to tie his bow tie. Yeah, the guy was a mortician. Yeah. And I thought to myself, that was a really good story. I think Bill Nye's winning me over with that great story. I mean, where was Ken Ham's story about learning how to tie his tie, right? So that was a big point. In our culture, the right mixture, I'm arguing tonight. And if I'm arguing wrongly, you can bring this up later on. But I argue tonight that in our present culture, these 5 items, physical appearance, confidence, comfort, funny, humor, and good stories, in our culture, the right mixture of these ingredients, these are what add up to persuasiveness in our culture. Notice what is not there. Evidence, facts, logic. Truth claims, small stuff. You can argue with that, or argue on that with me later if you want. Other factors to consider: the goal of the debaters. Their goals: to gain audience approval and perhaps a following. I mean, who knows? You're standing up there, but maybe you have a, maybe you want to start a TV show again. You want to get your name out. Maybe you want to raise money for a project you're doing, like building an ark, and you want to get more exposure. Who knows? Who knows what your real goal is? Possibly to gain personal recognition and fame, which can always be translated into support. Raise money, fulfill a calling. Maybe somebody believes that, you know what, even if I'm not the best guy to step up to the plate here, somebody's got to step up, and it might as well be me, if no one else is going to do it. I often think about this. when I think of the Old Testament prophets. They were such an eclectic group, if you will, such a widespread group. There were all kinds of different ones. Certainly, Jeremiah was extremely young. It certainly looks like he was a teenager when he was called. Either that or he lived to be really, really old. Anyway, he shows at times a propensity to say, why are we even doing this? But there were times when he tried to keep his mouth shut. And those of you that know Jeremiah know that every time he tried to keep his mouth shut, it says the word of God burned inside of him. He could not keep his mouth shut. And he had to speak. I mean, he couldn't do it with anything else. It'd be worse than death to keep quiet. And finally, to promote a message. Debate's a wonderful opportunity to promote a message. Certainly you never have the audience that you may, or certainly the audience that Tuesday night was such that I don't think you'll see something like that again for quite a while. I just looked at the YouTube, one of the YouTube presentations, the one I saw was 1.4 million just of that particular YouTube presentation. That's a lot of people. So, the goal of the debaters, what are they? Sometimes that's hard to know. Next, 3, debates in general. Let's talk about debates in general for a minute. First of all, participants now, the people up there doing the arguing, they don't usually change their minds, at least that evening, right? You ever see a debate and they're going back and forth and one guy says, you really brought up some great points tonight that I never thought of before. I think I'm changing my mind. You don't really see that. It's about as big a joke, quite frankly, as our halls of Congress and our halls of Harrisburg. Where we get out and we debate the issue. And we got this picture of a bunch of congressmen sitting around, like the thinker. That's a great point. Come on. All these guys have made deals with certain money people in their home constituencies. They've made up their minds so long before these debates take place and these discussions. Nobody's going to say they change their mind. They're just grandstanding for the most part. Debates are often used to shore up existing support. Maybe you don't win, maybe you don't look so great, but maybe your supporters are happy that you did what you did, and they'll support you even more. Debates, in general, were utilized by Christ on multiple occasions. We need to stop here for just a minute. Forgive me if you've heard this before, but we have missed a large part of Christ's ministry because all we can do is follow his ministry with a one-on-one. The one with the well, the woman taking adultery, and Nicodemus and so forth. And we should study these things. We should. But what's really interesting to me is that John is the one that gives us the most insight into Christ's one-on-one meetings, for the most part. For the most part. John gives us Nicodemus. John gives us the woman at the well. John gives us the woman taken in adultery. And you know who is the most focused on the arguments that Christ had? Is John and the results. Now, he doesn't list them as much but he focuses on the results. And when you get usually when you get a verse that says the common people heard him gladly, or the people argued, some people said, hey, could this be the Christ? And others say, no, it can't be, because the scribes and Pharisees haven't believed on him. Usually it's John talking about these fights. John is the one that focuses on these things. And the thing I just want to communicate right now is this. We don't spend enough time, I'm arguing, on Christ's fights, his debates, his arguments. And he had them. He couldn't go outside, he couldn't walk anywhere with his disciples without getting into a verbal battle. And one other thing about these battles too, my friends, he did not fight nice. He called people names that you and I wouldn't call people. He said things that you and I'd be scared stiff to say. He was a direct fighter. He was a nasty fighter. You don't call people snakes if you don't mean business. You don't say to a bunch of people who are really proud that Abraham was their father, that your father actually is the devil. You are children of the devil. You don't say those things, and over tea and crumpets, as what we would think. You don't do that. Christ was a nasty fighter. I almost want to get everybody to say this. I'm not going to do it. Say with me, Christ was a nasty fighter. But it's something that we do not embrace. We have created a Christ that wasn't nasty, that didn't fight for keeps, that just brought everybody into the kingdom just by being a nice guy. That's the Christ we have, my friends. It's not the Christ of Scripture at all. They were utilized by Christ on multiple occasions, usually aimed at the third-party audience. Okay, if your two debaters go back and forth, and you're not going to convince the other guy, then who are you going to convince? It's almost always that crowd, that third party. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to ask for raise your hands here. How many of you have ever noticed that when you, maybe it's at work, who knows, maybe it's a general store, it just pops up. You know, back when you were allowed to talk at the general store. Back before everything got so politically correct, that all you could do was tell your neighbor what great person they are. How many of you have ever noticed that when you get into a real ideological slug-it-out match, where there's winner take all, there's no quarter asked, and there's none given, take no prisoners argument, how many have you ever noticed that immediately there's somebody listening? Have you ever noticed that? I see your show of hands. Yeah, if stuff happens, it's just like they appear. It's just like all of a sudden they're there. We know that this happens. We know that Christ argued for the third party. Tell you how we know this. In Matthew 12, Christ told the scribes and Pharisees in Matthew 12, you are not going to believe. I'm going to send prophets, I'm going to send priests, and you know what you're going to do with them? You're not going to believe. You're going to kill some, you're going to crucify some you're going to just drive out, you're going to scourge. And after that, he starts talking in parables. But he still argues with them. Why? He's not trying to win the priests anymore. I'm sorry, the scribes and Pharisees anymore. He's trying to expose them. That's an angle of debates that we don't think about. Yes, sometimes we debate and discuss to win the other side. Sometimes we know that we're not going to win them, and so we don't debate and discuss to win the other side. We debate and discuss to expose the other side. And that's what Christ did from Matthew 12 on. Talk about that more if you like. Then, debates are generally useless when there is no standard of right and wrong, good and evil. I said the word generally, I should have just said useless. Debates are useless when there is no standard of right and wrong, good and evil. If there's no standard of right and wrong or good and evil, what are you arguing about? Nothing. There's nothing to argue about. Okay. This debate in particular, let's talk about this, was rather civil, wasn't it? Pretty civil. Hey, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah, Randy.
Bad.
But Randy thinks it's a bad thing. Maybe we'll ask you in a minute why. Yes, Mary.
I don't think it was bad.
Okay, you think it was good thing?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, good. Someone else?
I think it was good.
Think it was good?
I think it was a double-edged sword. Depends on who's watching it.
Okay. All right.
I didn't hear that, Joe. Which is,
Double-edged sword, depending who's watching it. Maybe, it might have been good, might have been bad. All right, anyone else? Yes?
I thought it was bad because they didn't have opportunity to get to that point. There wasn't a real, you couldn't fight with each other, so there was no passion.
Right.
It just wasn't allowed to get there.
Somewhat passionless, somewhat. Okay. All right, anyone else? Yeah, well, we can talk more about what and why later on. I'll just say this right now. Oftentimes, our enemies want us to be civil. So you guys gotta be civil. What are they really saying when they say, you guys ought to be civil? What are they really saying? Are they all about civility? These people that are killing babies inside the womb? Are they all about nicey nice? What are they really saying?
Be quiet.
What are they really saying?
don't pick on me.
Yeah, don't bring your weapons to this fight that are really gonna cut me. Keep those, you can bring the butter knife, but not the Bowie knife to this thing. We can talk about that later if you like. Did not utilize cross-examination. That was very disappointing to me in this particular debate. I can tell you in any kind of discussion, any kind of formal debate, the time when the audience is most paying attention is during the cross-examination time. And this debate did not use it. I was disappointed in that. Don't know why. Doesn't really matter. But it should have. In a limited sense, it displayed presuppositions in a very limited sense. I wish Ken Ham, he used the term belief, I wish he would have used the term faith. I really wish he would have done that. He didn't do it. He didn't come out there and say, like, forgive me, Greg Bonson would do every time, you got faith. I got faith, you got faith. And I'm going to tell you something, and this is just from my own personal experience. I have yet to lose, quote unquote, at least in a truncated sense, if you will, in a short sense, I've yet to lose a debate with a evolutionist wherein I did pin that faith label right on them. Because of course they have faith. They weren't there to see it. And I remember one time I had a discussion with one young man, and he was giving me the "you got faith" and "I believe the evidence" type stuff. And I just asked a really simple question. I said, so which one of your scientist buddies were on hand to observe the Big Bang? Since you believe in evidence and stuff, there must have been somebody there that has the evidence. And he said, well, no one. I said, you got faith. You believe the Big Bang, right? You got faith. Hey, I got faith, you got faith. And you know what? I can tell you that it takes the wind out of their sails every time. Because they come in flying with, you idiot Christians, you believe in pie in the sky and you have faith, whereas we believe in evidence. By the way, them and their evidence. I just wish I could put the scientists together with the philosophers in the same university. Because over here, we believe evidence, that's why we believe the Big Bang, and 20 minutes after the Big Bang happened, these particles keep coming in and out of existence. I've heard people say this stuff, right? Okay, all what happened 5 point whatever billion or how many billion years ago. You know what happened, when it happened, and what happened right after the other. Over here in the philosophy class, you know what they're talking about? They're wondering if a tree falls in the middle of a forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? Now, really, the two ought to really talk to each other, don't you think? You geniuses that know all what happened 5 billion years ago, talk to these people that can't figure out today if a tree falls in the middle of the forest and no one's there, it doesn't even make a sound. Honestly now. Wow. Okay. I don't even know how to jump into the middle of that myself. I think it does make a sound. No, it doesn't. Oh, please. Wow. What a waste of time. But these people can do it. And that's why it's ultimately about faith, which I wish we would have heard a lot more of. Ken Ham came out with that belief. I just wish he would have pushed the antithesis. Faith. Faith, Bill. Bill, you got faith. can only be judged finally in the near term. Okay, this debate in particular can only be judged in the near term based on the goals of the debaters, which is difficult to ascertain. We don't know what their personal goals were. So it's really hard to tell who won in that sort of a sense. And then next, the scramble to gain a post-debate advantage. Very quickly here. The winners write the history books. Should be an S there. The winners write the history books. You don't really know who won most of the time until you read who won. And the better people can argue who won will define the winner for you. That's why this whole idea of a winner thing is just a little bit overrated. The post-debate discussions, can be more focused and they can be less focused. What do I mean by that? Well, oftentimes after a debate like this, one particular point can be like dragged out a lot. It can be stretched out and it can be argued about. And you can have more focus in something like that. At the same time, it can also be less focused. Now what do I mean it can be more focused and less focused? Well, here's what I mean. The debate itself is 2.5 hours long. I remind you that we live, you don't need to be reminded, we live in a soundbite society, right? 30 seconds is about all we have time for. If you didn't see that debate the first time, do you think 3-4 weeks later you're going to go and watch it? Probably not. You're going to be moving on with your life. And so what can often happen is people can define it because they know that you're not going to watch it. So they'll define it for you. They'll take a 10-minute talk or a blog that takes you 7 minutes to read, and they'll define it for you with just a little tiny bit. So in that case, it's in that sense, it's less focused. Over time, almost always defines the winner. In other words, time is the definer. Give it time. It's like that in almost any battle, right? Who wins a battle, who loses a battle? Yeah, you can kind of tell that. But you know what? It's time that ultimately defines it. Especially with these debates, because everybody's arguing about who won. And everybody's arguing about the results. And it's usually fought by supporters in a snake pit. In other words, the supporters of the debaters are no less going to change their minds than the debaters themselves. And it becomes a snake pit. It becomes a battle with, it becomes a knife fight in the closet, is really what it becomes. And I know we live in a society where it's supposed to be pristine, and let's discuss the issues, and out in the open, we have sunshine laws, blah, blah, blah. And that's not the way it works at all. Number 6, the way in which a winner is determined is all about time, courage, conviction, love of God and neighbor, and eschatology, or belief of and in history. In other words, let's take this one right here, courage. Let's take that one. Do you think it took a little bit of courage for Paul to do what he did? Get thrown out of every, I mean, we saw what happened to him in 2 Corinthians. I mean, he was just, he was hammered. His body must have looked like a railroad net. Do you think we would have been speaking about his name today? He would have carried what he carried. Do you think he would have carried the day and established the Church of Jesus Christ if he would have had the courage that he had? Not the brains. He had brains. Not the rhetorical skills. He had the rhetorical skills. But he had something we don't normally think of when it comes to debate and discussion. He had courage. I want to tell you something. If he wouldn't have had that courage, his debating skills would have done nothing for him. We have too much of that going on. Great skills and rhetoric and so forth, and we can convince ourselves and we can convince the choir, but we don't have the courage to take it outside. Paul did. Courage and conviction. Paul had a love of God and love of his neighbor. I want to talk just briefly about this eschatology thing here. One thing you notice about godless methods, about godless ideology, they almost always have an eschatology. You know what? One of the things that made Karl Marx so powerful in his argument? If you ever read Das Kapital, which I tried one time, I wasted almost more time doing that than taking piano lessons. They were both a severe waste of time. If you ever tried to pick up that book, it's completely boring. It's just terrible. He made economic arguments, and one was he was a very covetous man. He made the covetous economic arguments. You know, the rich people have your money, so go burn down their house and kill them, get their money, and that'll be justice. I mean, he argued that. But one of his big arguments was eschatology. He argued about the march and the direction of history, and it was extremely powerful. Remember Hitler? How long was his Reich going to last? 1,000 years. He made the argument from history. It's a big argument that we need to utilize a little bit more, frankly, a lot more. Well, let's take a look at some famous debate losers. How about Samuel? Remember Samuel's debate, right? Hey, we want a king. So no, you don't. Yeah, we do. No, you don't. So Samuel drags out his facts. Okay, now later on, we want to talk about presuppositions. But if you want to study in presuppositionalism, go to 1 Samuel 8. You know, people that don't like presuppositionalists, like me, I am one of those. I'm one that says, you know what, people make up their minds already, and the facts don't matter. And other people, the evidentialists, say, oh yeah, just give people the facts. Give them the facts and it'll change their mind. Well, I don't know anybody that did a better job giving them the facts than Samuel, 1 Samuel 8. I mean, he dragged out the facts. And of course they changed their mind, right? He said, you know, he's going to take your kids, he's going to take your land, he's going to take your animals, and by the time you're done, you're basically going to be his slaves. And everybody said, you know, I never really thought about that. Okay, Sam, let's go back to your way. Of course not. He drags out every fact, and it just falls on completely deaf ears, and they go get a king. A serious debate loser, that's Samuel. Isaiah 6, your favorite passage. He gets his call, here my Lord sent me, and go tell these people that they better straighten out, God says. And of course Isaiah says, how long are we going to do this for? And God says, until there's nobody left, until the land is completely desolate. Isaiah, you're going to talk, and nobody's going to listen. No one. Jeremiah, again and again, in the court, out of court. Jeremiah, I think, had, if anybody should have swayed the people, I think it should have been Jeremiah. Because Jeremiah had the example of the northern 10 tribes that got carried off by the Assyrians. They didn't repent, they idol worship, they worship idols and turn their children to sacrifice their babies. And Jeremiah says, all you had to do is say, look to the north, guys. God did it to them, he'll do it to you. And they didn't listen, and they all got carried off into Babylon. And Jeremiah with them, at least part of the way. And then he came back. When you think of debate losers, does Paul come to mind? There's more than one way to lose a debate. Paul didn't lose a debate by a straw poll at the end of the evening. Who do you think did better? How did Paul, we kind of already touched on it, didn't we? How did Paul lose debates?
The end of a stick.
Getting dragged out feet first. And getting strung up someplace and getting bit. That's how he was. Paul was a consistent debate loser by our standards. Christ. What did Christ have to show for 3 years of ministry when he was crucified? What did he have to show? Almost nothing. He had one disciple, John, kind of watching from a distance. He had his main disciple, Peter, already deny him 3 times, depending on when it was in the evening. He had his mother, congratulations, had your mother, and a couple of her friends. That's pretty much all Christ had to show for 3 years of ministry. See, the point I'm trying to make is this. If we're supposed to step up, then we step up. And we're not always trying to figure out who gets to win the whole thing before we step up. Now, there may be a time to discover that and think about that. But here's 5 people who I think pretty much had an idea in every case, certainly all but maybe Jeremiah. I even think Jeremiah too, after a while he figured it out. In every case, these guys knew that when they got up and they spoke, they were going to quote unquote lose. They spoke up anyway. Well, I want to talk now about what you and I are up against, because that's what this is really about. Greg Layden's blog, Who Won the Bill Nye Ken Ham Debate? Bill Nye. I think that might have been written before it happened, but who knows? Just as an idea of this guy here was really all about evidence. If you get a chance to read his blog, he's really serious about evidence. He believes, apparently, this commercial was on his blog page there. Our climate has accumulated. Okay, I always have trouble reading this. That's 4 billion. Is that? Yeah, 4,226,523,866. And I copied this about a week ago or longer than that. This number's much higher now. It might even be 5. I don't know what it is now. Hiroshima atomic bombs have heat since 1970. I would be quite interested to find out how he got that number. And when I've watched this, this number here is going up like 1 per second.
He got it from his brother Osama.
Yeah, there you go. Osama bin. Yeah, there you go. Greg and Osama bin. They got together on this. I was thinking, I don't know, maybe it's really hot in the southern hemisphere, but when I copied this, it's pretty cold around where I'm from. So I don't know where all this heat's come from. I mean, this thing was just boom, boom, buzzing up. Wait till the summer. You won't even be able to figure out how to. Anyway, Mr. Evidence here, Greg Layden here, says this. He says, at the same time, however, Bill Nye also did well in this debate. Objectively speaking, he presented science, and more science. He presented science clearly, convincingly, chose his examples well, personalized the discussion. See, there we are, right? It was personal. Personalized the discussion wherever possible, even to the point of doing a Lewis Black moment, pulling out a fossil he picked up earlier in the week. During the few moments when we were allowed to see the evangelical audience during Bill Nye's presentation, they looked frankly charmed. And how could they not be? Bill Nye is a charming guy. You see the overwhelming evidence this man is bringing to the table. Facts, logic. In my view, again, biased in favor of science, because it's the correct view, Bill Nye won the debate by a large margin. Friends on Twitter and Facebook equated the debate to the Super Bowl, with Bill Nye being the Seahawks and Ken Ham being Denver. I thought that was interesting if you saw the Super Bowl. Did you really have to explain which one you thought was which? I guess so. All right. Anyway, perhaps even an understatement that could be, even a poll on a Christian website gave a strong win to Nye. Now this is what I want to talk about here. I want to talk about what you and I are up against. I read this blog and I said, I really would like to find out about this poll that gave a strong win to Bill Nye. So I do a little bit of research and I click on it like anybody would, and I come up to this particular website. I don't even know how to say it, Farangula, I don't even know what that means. And this particular site is not the original site. It's a secondary site. Now, anybody is going to smell a rat at this point. This is not like the old days when you had to check out a secondary source. You had to go down to the library, you had to order a book, and you had to go digging all over the place. This is just clicking, right? If you can find a secondary source, you can find a primary source in this internet age, right? I'm not leaving anybody behind here, I'm sure. So I'm smelling a rat here. We got a secondary source, that's weird. So I click through and I get finally the primary source. a place called Christian Today out of the UK. And I see this at the top, watch Bill Nye versus Ken Ham debate, video in full here. Who won creation versus evolution debate? Poll, right here. So I click on it. Didn't look too clickable, but I didn't know what else to do, so I clicked on that. And I got nothing. Now, you can't see it, and I'll show you in a minute what I finally found. But I went through the entire page 3 times, could not find this poll anywhere. Couldn't find it. Couldn't find where I could vote, couldn't find where I could see the results, nothing. So in my frustration, I call up my friend and fellow person who knows a lot more than I do about the internet, Toby Grader. I said, Toby, help me out. I'm trying to figure this thing out. I'm trying to figure out where it is, what I'm doing wrong. Whatever they're saying there's a poll, I can't find it anywhere. I'm on the site. And Toby then contacts the site coordinator, which got us nothing. And then he turned you on to the person that did the poll, which also got us nothing. In the meantime, every day I'm going back. Twice a day I'm going back. How can I do this? Never find it. But finally, about 4 days afterwards, after I saw it quoted for the first time, I did find this, and I was able to at least click on it. But this little thing here, see, you click on that, and you got the little vote total down there. It wasn't there for 4 days. And I read this part, I read this part, it didn't exist. Well, okay, you're smelling a rat, but in the meantime, I'm doing other research, I'm reading what other people have to say, and I come across the Christian Science Monitor. And I read Bill Nye versus Ken Ham, who won, and I read this. Bill Nye debates Ken Ham, post-debate analysis and polls praise the science guy, Bill Nye, in his debate against Creation Museum President Ken Ham, with some caution that the act of debating it's let Ham credence, blah, 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 to pseudoscience. Well, they mention polls here. Okay, first of all, there's only one poll that they mention. Guess which poll it is? It's back. That 92-8 thing, it's back. It's that one. And by the way, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a journalist. And I did not smoke all my English themes in English composition class. But I think I might have got marked off for this little faux pas right here. We said polls in the presentation, and it turns out there's only one poll. Okay, am I making too big of a deal? I don't think so. Not all the red ink I saw in some of my compositions. No, it's a poll. Say poll. But it's poll. All right, well, okay, so there's that's showing up. So I buzz along over to Salon magazine there. That should be a pretty good objective source. And I'm looking for some more information about this poll thing. And I find out that 92% say Bill Nye won in Christian Today poll. Guess what's back again? That same poll, they keep on bringing it up. You know, the same one that I couldn't find looking for 3 days? It's all over the place. And you know, the whole time I'm thinking, you science geniuses, you. You know, you're all about, scientific poll, a scientific study. Isn't there a scientific poll to tell us who won? Come on, everybody knows the 92-8 thing is bogus. Come on, nobody wins 92-8. Not even, nobody does that. Anyway, and no, for all their talk about science, there's no scientific poll. None. And I'm even looking for it. Nothing. Well, I'm thinking, who needs a scientific poll when you have Christian Today, fraud poll, 92-8? Why drag out a scientific poll? That would just go right against you. So I'm coming up with this as well. Well, as we wrap up, here tonight, some of you may remember that, I don't have it with me, I should have brought it. Some of you may remember that at one point Bill Nye said that Kentucky has no nuclear medicine facilities. Remember that one? Yeah. His kind of subtle statement behind everything else was saying that, Kentucky's backwards. Guess Kentucky's not, not big enough for Creation Museum and nuclear medicine. You have one or the other. Well, there was a gentleman, a doctor, that wrote a letter to Bill Nye, and I don't have it with me, unfortunately. I meant to bring it. If you get on Ken Ham's website, you can read it. And he referenced this website, and he referenced on this website not one, but two. There's Louisville, and there's Lexington, Kentucky. And check out what you can get a major in. Nuclear medicine technology. There we go, nuclear medicine and molecular imaging technology program. Okay, Bill Nye's going to tell us what happened a billion years ago, but he can't tell us what's happening in Kentucky today and get it right. Now this, to me, is a very, very big deal here. This is huge. And this man went on to say, by the way, this doctor, that by the way, I checked out your state, Washington. And Washington only has one nuclear facility. So by your logic, whoever the smartest state is the one that has the most nuclear facilities. I guess Kentucky's like twice as far along as Washington, I don't know. The purpose of the night was tonight to work out some of these things and talk about them. But what do they mean to us? We have people, some in the Christian circles, basically saying we shouldn't do this stuff. It won't convince anybody. It won't change anybody's mind. Just stay away from arguments. It's almost like a Christian thing nowadays, isn't it? Not to argue, but to stay away from argument. Well, I think there's 4 things that we should take away from this. When it comes to debates, as far as debates are concerned, number 1, we should welcome. Do you ever think how much of the Bible would be cut out if we cut out all the conflicts between Christians and anti-Christians, between godly prophets and ungodly kings, between Christ and his opponents, between Paul and the people who argue? Do you ever think how much we'd cut out if we cut all that out? We should welcome the debate. One of the reasons is because the longer it goes, the better chance we have of winning. We can talk about that later if you want. Secondly, we should watch. Whenever there's a conflict between a godly person and an ungodly person, we should watch and pay attention and learn. That's the time when we should be paying the most attention. Instead of wringing our hands and saying, and I've seen this happen, wring your hands saying, oh my goodness, I'm so uncomfortable now. My blood pressure's up. We should run the other way. We should get ourselves involved. We should watch and be right there. Thirdly, we should work. How many of us know how to conduct ourselves when things get a little hot? That's one of the ways that our opponents deal with us. They know that we as Christians don't like it when it gets hot. They know that we're real comfortable with a nice little pristine debate. And so all they have to do to chase us off the floor, all they have to do is turn it up a notch with a little bit of name calling and a little bit of rowdy nonsense, and they know that we'll head for the hills. I'm glad Christ wasn't like that. He didn't head for the hills. We should work. We should learn how to keep ourselves going in these kinds of things and to not shrink like a vial when things get hot. And then fourthly, to conclude, we should win. We believe in nothing less than the way, the truth, and the life. We believe in nothing less than that. how can we lose?